Ah, now I will tell you about one of those great heroes that even time has eclipsed. One of Byzantium's mightiest, most brilliant, and most feared commanders, Belisarius. He was a man even emperors shied away from. His enemies trembled at the mention of his name, and in the eyes of his own people he was a legend. In the midst of an era of intrigue at the palace gates, he would be known as the invisible ruler of Byzantium, while at the same time offering his loyalty to his emperor. But my friends, do not think that this tale will be a story of triumph from beginning to end. For Belisarius' path was not only drawn on the battlefields, but also in the mysterious corridors of Byzantium, in court games surrounded by dangers, in palace intrigues full of treachery. A story of heroism, loyalty, and betrayed loyalty begins. Hold on tight and let this story from across the centuries envelop you. Ah, dear friends, now we are going back to the beginning of this great commander's journey. To those days when Belisarius first stepped onto the stage of the Byzantine Empire. Imagine now a young man taking his first step into history as an ordinary soldier, but he was no ordinary soldier, nor did he have an ordinary heart. Belisarius was born in the harsh lands of Thrace, raised in a humble family, but even at that age he was recognized as having the spirit of a great warrior. Hardened by the cold winds of Thrace, he took up his sword at a young age. His goal was not just to be a soldier, but to write his own epic on the battlefield. Before he was even in his 20s, he quickly rose to prominence with his talent for military strategy and his courage. This young man's extraordinary intelligence and alertness on the battlefield reached the ears of the Emperor Justinian. He was the most ambitious leader of his time, eager to restore Byzantium to its former glory. He needed a strong army and a smart and loyal commander. That's when this talented young man caught Justinian's attention. Ah, my friends, imagine a commander loyal enough to win the emperor's trust at a young age, ever brave and, moreover, strong enough to shoulder the emperor's great ideals. Justinian saw this fire in Belisarius' soul and took him into the imperial service. Belisarius went from being just a soldier to becoming Justinian's most trusted commander, his right-hand man. Now fate had set him on a brand new path to write the history of the Byzantine Empire. Dear friends, this was just the beginning for Belisarius. His successes on the battlefields and his loyalty to the emperor would make him the rising star of Byzantium and a hero to be reckoned with in his circle. Was this young commander's loyalty to his emperor stronger, or his determination to forge his own destiny? The answer to this question would lead Belisarius to find himself at the center of all Byzantine court intrigue. Ah, friends, Justinian and Belisarius. Here are two great forces, two great souls in Byzantine history. When these two men crossed paths, Byzantium was preparing to undergo a profound change. Justinian was a leader who aimed to restore his empire to its former glory. He had one ideal in mind: to return to the old frontiers of the Roman Empire, to the days of glory. But for this great goal, he needed a commander who was not only brilliant, but also loyal. That person could be none other than Belisarius. Justinian saw Belisarius as more than a commander. He saw him as a partner, a military arm of his dreams. But friends, there was a fine line in this balance of power. The emperor had high expectations of Belisarius. He wanted him not only to win battles, but also to unite the people and the army behind him. That is why he gave Belisarius extraordinary powers. Justinian put Belisarius in the field as his eyes and ears, a mighty shadow that he could touch wherever he laid his hand. He entrusted him with thousands of soldiers, well-equipped legions, and a loyal army. Belisarius' talents, friends, were not only his genius in battle. He also became a household name. His victories on the battlefield made him almost a legend in the eyes of the people, and he was whispered about in the streets of Byzantium. There were those who saw him not only as a commander, but also as a representative of justice and power in the eyes of the people. These affectionate glances of the people, friends, began to worry Justinian. Although he regarded Belisarius as his loyal servant, the thought that this rising popularity might pose a threat in the future was quietly creeping into the corners of his mind. Belisarius, on the other hand, continued to walk this balance, fighting for Justinian's great ideals while at the same time becoming a hero beloved by his people. His victories consolidated the empire's power and gave the people a beacon of hope. But my friends, let us ask ourselves once more, the greater the power of a commander, the more the confidence of an emperor is shaken. The echo of this question began to reverberate within the walls of the Byzantine palace. The popularity and power that Belisarius gained would make the balance between him and the emperor increasingly fragile, and that fragility would eventually reveal the deepest intrigues of Byzantium. Oh friends, I must tell you about those fateful days when the Nika rebellion broke out, the turmoil that shook Byzantium. On a cold winter day in 532, Constantinople, the heart of Byzantium, was burning with one of the greatest uprisings the empire had ever seen. The people were gathered in the hippodrome, as if they were burning in the fire of their own troubles and frustrations. Imagine some of the people dressed in blue, others in green. It was a division born out of years of racetrack rivalry. The blue and green groups were no longer just for the racers, but had become symbols of a battle for power and influence. On that day, a small spark turned into a huge fire. There was great popular anger against the emperor and his rule. Taxes had risen, justice had been undermined, and it was as if the Byzantine people had turned away from their leader. This rebellion was the moment when all this unrest turned into a scream. People gathered in the streets, shouting Nika, that is, victory, and poured out of the hippodrome, marching towards the emperor's palace. Nothing seemed to be able to stop them now. Just then, friends, Belisarius appeared on the scene. He was not just a commander, but a fearless hero of the people. As rebels swept through the streets of Constantinople, Belisarius, with only a few loyal soldiers at his side, set out to crush an entire rebellion. With his sword and his wits, he cast a shadow over the rebellion. In the eyes of the people, he was no longer just a soldier, but a man of courage fighting to save the empire. Belisarius' clever strategies and his brave fight to crush the rebellion soon spread throughout Byzantium. Just imagine when the great rebellion that started in the hippodrome ended with Belisarius' command. The Byzantine people no longer looked at him as just a commander, but as a savior. Justinian's dominance of the throne had continued thanks to Belisarius' sword. It was this victory that made Belisarius' name legendary not only on the streets of Byzantium but throughout the empire. His heroism enshrined him in history and elevated him once again in the eyes of the people as the emperor's most loyal protector. But friends, every victory comes at a price, and this victory would reshape the balance of power between Justinian and Belisarius. Ah, my dear listeners, I will now take you back to the epic adventure that heralded the resurgence of the Byzantine Empire and was known in history as the Vandal campaign. This was the beginning of a series of great victories that would make Belisarius not only a commander, but perhaps the greatest savior of the empire. After the Nika revolt in 532, Byzantium was an empire that was being reborn from the ashes. However, the western territories once ruled by Rome were still under threat, and the Vandal kingdom, especially in North Africa, cast a dark shadow over Byzantium, as did many other powers with their eyes on former Roman territory. Justinian wanted to regain these lands and return to the glory days of the empire, and Belisarius was to be the bravest bearer of this dream. On Justinian's orders, Belisarius set off for North Africa. Think about it, dear friends, the seas of those days were also full of dangers. Sailing was a feat of courage in itself, especially for an army going to war. But Belisarius, as a fearless leader, sailed across the Mediterranean with a huge fleet. His army was as steadfast, brave, and determined as the sun after the rain. Belisarius soon reached the heart of the Vandal kingdom, Carthage, and led one of the most brilliantly planned campaigns in history. To beat the Vandal army at its own game, Belisarius devised a masterful strategy. He ambushed them and played his cards in such a way that the Vandals could do nothing but watch their entire kingdom slip away. As Carthage fell as the capital of the Vandal kingdom, Byzantine shouts of victory echoed across the Mediterranean. Belisarius had become not just a commander, but a hero who had brought Byzantium back to the western lands. The victory expanded Byzantium's borders and consolidated Justinian's authority. But dear friends, this victory had another profound effect. The Emperor Justinian was of course very proud of Belisarius' victories, but at the same time the rise of this young commander gave him a kind of anxiety. Belisarius' victories increased his power not only in the eyes of Byzantium, but also in the eyes of the people. Belisarius' glorious victory went down in history not only as a military success, but as a symbol of Byzantium's rebirth from the ashes. It would embolden the empire for future conquests and set Belisarius on a path where greater and more difficult challenges awaited. But friends, every great victory must be followed by great trials. Ah, dear listeners, I will now take you to a glorious European land in pursuit of one of Byzantium's greatest dreams, to bring Western Rome back into Byzantine territory. That is, to rebuild the eternal glory of Rome. But it would not be an easy journey, for Belisarius and his army had to fight an uphill battle against formidable opponents, especially the Goths. Justinian longed to regain the lands where the Roman Empire had once ruled, and he set his sights on Italy in this holy cause. He trusted Belisarius, whose successes in the Vandal campaign had left the emperor in awe of the young commander's strength. In Italy, however, things were going to be more complicated, more difficult. The Goths were vigorously defending Italy, and this campaign would not be as swiftly concluded as the victory over the Vandals. In 544, Belisarius landed in Italy and found himself up against the resistance of the Goths. Ah, these Goths, dear friends, cold-blooded warriors, undaunted by hardship. Every village, every city seemed to say to Belisarius, "You can't pass through here." I remember that Belisarius, instead of fighting directly, decided to wear down the Goths with a more subtle, cleverer tactic. Instead of attacking the cities directly, he condemned the Goths to starvation and exhaustion with long sieges. Ah, patience, my dear friends, was the greatest weapon in this victory. The moment he retook Rome from the Goths was one of the high points of Belisarius' victories. But the Goths did not give up immediately. They held out for strategic cities like Ravenna. While Belisarius was constantly winning victories, he was also struggling to get enough support from Byzantium. Justinian's intrigues in the capital and lack of resources made Belisarius' campaign even more difficult. As time passed, Belisarius had to contend with both the resistance of his enemy and the imperial intrigues he had left behind. Finally, when Ravenna also fell into Belisarius' hands, the leader of the Goths surrendered. With this great victory, Belisarius had annexed the once glorious lands of Rome to Byzantium. But, oh friends, though the victory was Belisarius' own personal triumph, the jealous eyes within Byzantium would make it difficult even for him. The Gothic wars had crowned Belisarius a hero, but who knew what real battles awaited him? While this great commander would win the admiration of the people, he would also become the target of intrigues within the empire. Now I am taking you, dear friends, to those glorious yet dark palace corridors of Byzantium, to those complicated days when Belisarius, the hero of the battlefields, entered a war surrounded not by the sword this time, but by intrigue. Belisarius' epic victories against the Goths and the Vandals were of course the talk of the people. However, his fame was echoing not only on the battlefields but also in the marble corridors of the palace, and this echo was not pleasing to Justinian's ears. For the price of victory in Byzantium was often jealousy and betrayal. The rise of Belisarius threatened many of the nobles who had rallied around the emperor. The palace walls of Byzantium, friends, hide more than you see. Behind those walls, scheming nobles, unhappy with Belisarius' successes, whispered that Justinian was overshadowed by them. Justinian's trust in Belisarius began to be shaken by these whispers, and the heroic commander's courage and reputation began to look like a threat to the emperor's throne. One day, Belisarius' public fame went from being a source of pride for the emperor to a threat to the balance of power at court. It was even whispered in the emperor's ear that Belisarius might become his rival. It was not difficult to see who was behind these rumors. Around the palace, Belisarius' enemies were increasing, and every day another seed of discord was sown in Justinian's ear. Those were the days when Justinian had to convince his own head and heart to remove his most trusted commander. While Belisarius was making epics on the battlefield with every order from his emperor, at court he was oblivious to the insidious plots against him. As Justinian began to lose confidence in Belisarius' loyalty, Belisarius found himself crushed under the weight of his own achievements in his own homeland. The shrewd politics of the palace were such as to destroy not only the confidence of a soldier, but the confidence of Byzantium itself. Dear friends, history is not always written with the sword. Sometimes it is words and rumors that inflict the deepest wounds. And it was these rumors that became the most ruthless weapons that threatened the glory of Byzantium. Belisarius, for all his achievements, was caught in the middle of this game, a figure overshadowed by the throne. But history would never forget his stance in the face of palace intrigue. My friends, the fall of a legendary commander like Belisarius shows how a hero can be destroyed not only by swords but also by whispers. Now I will tell you about those tragic days when Justinian's faith in his most trusted commander was shaken, in the shadow of the betrayals and intrigues that echoed between the cold stone walls of the palace. Belisarius was a hero who fought battles with the dream of reconquering the glorious lands of Rome for Byzantium. He won countless victories over Goths, Vandals, and Persians, and his fame spread far beyond Constantinople, even into enemy lands. His name was one of the cornerstones on which Justinian's glorious reign was built. But my friends, with great victories come great jealousies. Every word whispered in the palace became a knot in the circle of betrayal woven around Belisarius' head. For many years, Justinian had placed deep trust in Belisarius, giving him the authority to defeat kings and command legions. But the shadows of power, lust, and suspicion were as great as the light of triumph. Intrigues in the palace seized every opportunity in Belisarius' shadow to whisper to the emperor that the commander might be in collusion with the enemy, or even covet the throne. These rumors planted a poisonous seed in Justinian's mind, and Belisarius' victories over his enemies were no longer seen as a tribute, but as a threat to the throne. Belisarius was at war not only on the battlefield but also inside the palace. Justinian, with this growing suspicion of his longtime and most trusted commander, became hesitant to give him more authority. The emperor began to distance himself from Belisarius over time, pursued by rumors that Belisarius' victories were casting a shadow over the splendor of the palace. Belisarius' successes, far from erasing the suspicion of him, were gradually discrediting him. The emperor no longer believed in his loyalty. He began to listen more and more to the words of the sycophants around him. And the day came when Belisarius was accused of treason. This commander, who had dedicated his life to Byzantium, had gone from being a hero in the eyes of the people and his soldiers to a threat in the eyes of the emperor. Belisarius was exiled from Constantinople as a threat to the throne. Ah, my friends, this was not just the fall of a commander, but a reflection of the storms raging within the Byzantine Empire. These events show how the winds of treachery that circulated in the secret corridors of the palace shook the foundations of Byzantium and set the stage for its destruction. Belisarius spent the last years of his life in exile, his name a shining star in the echo of the battlefields, now buried in the cold silence behind the palace walls. The Emperor Justinian perhaps regretted the loss of what had once been his most trusted commander. But the intoxicating power of power prevented him from admitting this regret. And so, my friends, the fall of Belisarius is a bitter page in Byzantine history, a story that shows how even the most loyal of friends can be wasted, how power and ambition can change everything. Ah, my friends, let us dive into the fascinating yet dark pages of Byzantium and discover the events that led Belisarius to be known as the Shadow Emperor. Belisarius was a hero in everyone's hearts, a hero who protected the Byzantine Empire in the eyes of the people, a monument of loyalty. Unfortunately, this heroism was seen as a threat in the cold corridors of the palace. The people spoke of Belisarius' achievements with admiration and revered his glorious victories. It was what distinguished him from an ordinary commander and made him perhaps more famous than the emperor of his time. It was therefore inevitable that he became popularly known as the Shadow Emperor. But this image, my friends, found a great resonance not only in the language of the people, but also in the deep corridors of Byzantium. The real truth behind his being called the Shadow Emperor was his indirect and influential presence in the empire. Belisarius' mesmerizing effect on the populace was met with praise by his loyal soldiers and a look of fear in the envious eyes of the court. Even Emperor Justinian began to feel uncomfortable with this great shadow hanging over the throne in the eyes of his people. At the time, amidst the intrigues surrounding Justinian, legends about Belisarius were spreading by word of mouth. Although the Byzantine public had always recognized Belisarius as a loyal servant to the emperor, whispers behind the closed doors of the palace suggested that he was a shadow emperor intent on taking over the throne. These legends grew to such an extent that Belisarius became known to the people as the real ruler of Byzantium, as well as a true hero. The people's faith was so strong that even the walls of the palace trembled as they sang and lamented Belisarius in the streets. Inside the palace, the rumors further undermined Justinian's confidence. Court officials, nobles, and even Belisarius' old friends began to distance themselves from the great commander with whom they had once fought, seeing him as a dangerous threat. Being called the Shadow Emperor increased Belisarius' prestige in the eyes of the people and became a headache for Justinian. Belisarius had left a powerful imprint on the future of Byzantium. Being called the Shadow Emperor reflected this profound influence. And sadly, this sealed Belisarius' fate. Although his name remained in the mouths of the people as the true protector of the empire, he had become a threat in the dark intrigues of the palace. His reputation as the Shadow Emperor became a legend representing Byzantium's glorious yet complex balance of power. The shadow of Belisarius fell over the Byzantine Empire and disappeared into eternity as a hero to whom the people paid homage. And so, my friends, the story of Belisarius continued to resonate as a legend in the language of the people amidst the endless power struggles of Byzantium. Ah, my dear friends, let us now turn to the sad pages of Belisarius' life, to the dark period that followed years of shining glory. Imagine that this valiant commander, who once ran from victory to victory, uniting the east and west of the empire, was now heading towards the end of his life as a lonely man within the cold walls of the Byzantine palace, overwhelmed by deep suspicion and fear. Belisarius had spent his youth and maturity on the battlefield, standing fearlessly in the face of the enemy and defending the borders of the Byzantine Empire. But now, as he approached old age, he faced those slyly smiling eyes in the palace that eagerly awaited his downfall. The rumors about him no longer portrayed him as the mighty general he had once been, but as a threat. Emperor Justinian's trust in his old friend had long since been shaken, and in this circle of suspicion, Belisarius had become a shadow, not the hero he had once been. His days of glory were gone. The rooms given to him in the palace constricted his heart as they reminded him of the vastness of the imperial lands for which he had once fought. In these last years in the depths of the palace, the respect of those around him gradually faded, and he was remembered only as an old soldier. You know how sometimes fate throws you into a series of events that even the strongest cannot cope with, and Belisarius was gradually lost in that cruel cycle. Discredited by order of the emperor, still a hero in the eyes of the people, to the court he was only a name lost in the shadows of the past. And finally, when the time came for his death, the Byzantine people witnessed Belisarius passing with deep mourning. His death left a deep mark on Byzantium, for he was not just a commander, but an unshakable rock for the empire. But his legacy was not only a life of triumph, but also a story of betrayal, suspicion, and loneliness. Some say he remained a loyal servant of the empire, until the end. Others say he was the victim of the power games that led him to be known as the Shadow Emperor. Thus, the last days of Belisarius' life, like the rest of his years, were a complex and deeply marked path. Even after his death, he remained a legendary hero in the hearts of the Byzantine people, and the stories about him have been passed down for generations. Ah, dear friends, Belisarius' incredible life story doesn't just end here. In fact, it's really after his death that his impact on history starts to take shape. This great general, who left a mark on the rise and turbulent times of the Byzantine Empire, engraved his name in history not only for Byzantium but for the entire world with his brilliant battlefield victories and strategic mind. Belisarius fought to protect and even expand the empire's borders, taking on the Persians to the east and the Goths to the west with courage and tactical genius. He wasn't just a general, he was the sword of the empire, playing a central role in a golden era for Byzantium. He was the one who came closest to realizing Justinian's dream of rebuilding Rome, the victories he won over barbarian kingdoms, and the respect he commanded, especially from Rome, would be remembered not only in his time but for centuries to come. But Belisarius' story wasn't just about his victories. He was entangled in the dark, intrigue-filled corridors of the palace, where enemies, allies, and jealous eyes were always watching. Even though his bond with Justinian was strong, it was constantly tested by palace intrigues and political games. Belisarius stood tall, not only on the battlefield but in the heart of these power struggles. Yet the ruthless nature of these schemes gradually drove him into deep loneliness. To the emperor, he became less of a hero and more of a potential threat, which eventually led to his downfall. Today, historians admire his achievements while trying to understand the political atmosphere that set the stage for his tragic end. Some see Belisarius as Byzantium's most loyal general, while others see him as a tragic figure overshadowed by ambition and power games. But one fact remains undisputed: Belisarius' contributions to the empire, his legacy that shaped the Byzantine army, and his victories have made him one of history's immortal names. The legacy of Belisarius isn't just in the battles he won, it's a testament to how a soldier could remain loyal and honorable, yet find himself isolated in the end. This is why history never forgets his name, and as we hear his story, we are reminded once more of an empire's battle between glory and decline. Ah, dear friends. And so we reach the end of this unforgettable tale, one that left its mark on the dusty pages of history. Together, we followed Belisarius through his tumultuous rise, his battlefield victories, the betrayals he faced in the shadowed palace corridors, his eventual fall from grace, and finally, his loneliness and bittersweet end. This story is a powerful example of how a hero's journey is shaped not just by victories but by pain, isolation, and an unending loyalty. Belisarius was the steadfast shield of Byzantium, a bold commander fighting to revive the glory of Rome, and yet a tragic hero crushed under the weight of palace intrigues. He's remembered not only for his victories but for the daggers of betrayal that pierced his heart. Now let's close our eyes, take a deep breath, and reflect on Belisarius' story. Though centuries have passed, this tale speaks to us of loyalty, honor, and the unchanging face of betrayal. As we journeyed through history, we touched the inner world of a hero, tracing the path he left behind. So, my friends, as we come to the end of this great saga whispered by history, the most valuable lesson we take away is that victories are fleeting, but loyalty and honor are timeless. Until the next story, in another time, with new heroes. Farewell for now, and keep sailing in the endless sea of history. For in every wave, in every storm, lies a new story waiting to be told, a new lesson to be learned. See you on the next journey, friends.